Hello and welcome to Value Stream Mapping Basics. We're talking about an example today from the game Stardew Valley. So, what we're going to look at is how many Starfruit wines we're actually getting done and how many we need to increase to be able to meet that demand of our customer. Now, this is part of a four-part series where we're looking at Value Stream Mapping Basics. Previously, we've talked about what a value stream map is, we've talked about the basics of a value stream map. In this video, we're going to do an example together. And in our final video, we're going to talk about those final tips and tricks. So let's go ahead and look at this Stardew Valley example. Stardew Valley is an open ended role playing game where you run a farm, mine, and fish. The game cycles through all four seasons, and after achieving certain tasks, unlocks additional spaces where some of the seasonal constraints are lifted. The fruit we are focused on planting is the Starfruit, which is not unlocked until completing one of the community center bundles. Once you have access to the seeds, they can only be planted in one season until you unlock the greenhouse and Ginger Island, expanding the area where you can plant the seeds. My partner and I are on year 3 and have farms at our homestead, in the greenhouse, and on Ginger Island. So we have a new customer in Stardew Valley that's come in and they've requested 25 starfruit wines to be delivered daily. Now, we currently produce Starfruit Valley wines and we produce that in a push system. So we just make as much as we can, as fast as we can, and we put it in the bucket. And we have no idea how many we're making or how many we could possibly make to meet this expectation from our new customer. We've got a lot of ideas on how to improve, but we don't know that that's actually going to affect the output or the final delivery of those Starfruit wines. So we start here with our basic value stream map setup. You can see here our material flow. So these are the top 5 to 7 steps that it takes to transform those seeds into wine. We have our customer who is making this request of 25 starfruit wines per day. And then we have our supplier that gives us the seeds to be able to make this wine. At the bottom, we have our lead time ladder. And below each process step, we have some of that data that we're going to collect. Now, one thing I noticed, what we should always do is we should always go out to Gemba to see what's really happening. And that's exactly what I did. I printed out this map and then I went out to Gemba to see what was actually happening in the process and started taking notes. When I did that, I realized a mistake that I had made, which I said Pierre's is where I get the seeds, but it's not Pierre's, it's actually Sandy at Oasis, which is why it's so important to go out and actually see the process because there's little things like that that you may miss or make assumptions on. Now, when we buy the seed, it costs 400G, but when we sell that wine, it's 6,300 per item. So we see here our top 5 to 7 value stream steps, our top steps that change our product or service in some way. Now, if we look at this process, we can see that we have the seeds delivered. It takes us about 95 to 210 seconds per run to go get seeds, but we can get as many seeds as we want. Now, when we plant the seeds, what we saw was we had about 68 seeds that had not been planted. Then we have all the seeds that are planted. Now, we can plant about 18 seeds every 2 seconds with where we're at today with our tools. And our total capacity is about 744 to 1186. So that's how much we can have planted at any given time based on the season. So some seasons we can have a bit more planted than others. So daily, I could have 744 to 1186 star fruit seeds planted and growing. Once they're planted, I need to harvest that fruit. So currently there's 251 items that are ready to be harvested or are growing in the ground waiting to be harvested. So to harvest that fruit, it takes 13 days. So it takes 13 days to grow that fruit. And we have that same total capacity, which means that daily we would be harvesting 57 to 91 pieces of fruit. That's how much we could harvest if we had this so that each day 1/13 of 744 to 1186 was coming ready to harvest, right? Was ripe. So we have 168 right now fruit that are ready to be made into wine. But when we look at our process for wine, what we see is it takes 7 days. We only have 23 kegs, which means we could actually only do 3.2 per day. We could only right now deliver from the making wine 3.2 Starfruit Valley wines per day. And finally, we have the aged wine. So if we want to get it up to that iridium quality, then we actually only have the capacity to do that at zero point 0.7 bottles of wine per day. So to meet this customer demand, we're vastly under what we need to be to deliver this wine. And we can see some of that here where it takes 56 days in this step to be able to actually complete this. And since we only have 40 casks, we're only going to be able to deliver zero point 0.7. So let's look at some of the highlights here. So first we went to Gemba, we saw that it was not Pierre's, that it was Oasis. We realized that actually all of our communications are after we deliver things to our customers. So the only communication we have is after we deliver the wine. We don't have anything kind of seeing how we're doing along our process to make sure that we can deliver these 25 items. We realize that because we have so much fruit, we're actually not making wine with a lot of the fruit. Only maybe 10 to 20% is actually going into the kegs and the casks. The rest is all going into making jelly. So that's really getting a big loss. And then we have this question here of, do we need to age the wine, right? So we've made the wine. Does it need to be aged? Is this something the customer wants or needs? Because this takes 56 days by itself. So this is a huge amount of lead time that it adds to our process. If we could eliminate that, we could deliver a lot more wine much faster. So that would change the bottleneck from being aging wine to making wine. So we're going to ask that question to our customer. And finally, just kind of a highlight here was that when we first looked at this process, our initial thoughts were to plant more starfruit. That's what we've been doing. We've just been planting more and more starfruit. But that actually isn't addressing the bottleneck to get more items off the line. So we're going to go ahead and get some clarity around some of these items that we've highlighted and clean up our value stream map based on that. So we've cleaned up our value stream map a bit. What we found out was that we don't need to age the cask, right? So we asked our client, does it need to be iridium quality? And our customer said, no, it doesn't need to be iridium quality. It just needs to be starfruit wine. So that means that the bottleneck that we need to focus on is making more wine, which means to do that, we would need 47 more kegs. And that's where we're going to focus our improvement. There's a million other things that we could do here to make the process better, but this is the only one that's actually going to change the number of items that we get across the line each and every single day. Again, this is a snapshot in time. If I do this in 2 weeks or 3 months when I've created more kegs, it may have changed. We may have a different bottleneck. So our initial reaction was to plant more, but what we found out was that's not actually going to address the issue. So once we got this data up here, we were able to see that we actually need to make more kegs to be able to deliver this value to our customer. In our next video, we're going to talk more about those final tips and tricks so that you can construct your value stream. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at Beautiful Opportunities Consulting. We are always here to help you build those thriving process improvement programs and to find a mentor that can really unlock these tools for you. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Happy improving.